Hello and welcome to the last part of our basic training on the remote SIM provisioning. My name is Olga Kietler. I'm a senior technical consultant at Comprion. But before we dive into the details, let's first of all, let's take a look back and repeat some main concepts, just to refresh. We'll take a look back and talk about the definition of the EUSSC, the two GSMA solutions, the M2M architecture, and the consumer devices architecture. As a summary, so do you remember we had these 4 W questions? This was just to test your knowledge. If the answers to these questions are easy for you, then you're good to go. Prepared, very good for this last part of the training. Okay, the GSMA definition of the EUSSC. Remember, there are 2 parts to solve the 2 challenges. Which components are common for M2M and consumer devices ecosystem? Especially in the last part of so in the previous part and third part of the training, I talked about the similarities and differences between the M2M and consumer devices. Yes, similarities and the differences between M2M and consumer devices. As you know, so one of the main difference in general is the direction of control. In the M2M ecosystem, so the control comes from the backend infrastructure, and in the consumer devices, the consumer or the end user has the control about the choice of their operator. Last question was about the main RSP procedures. I think that's easy. The adding profile or downloading the profile, enabling, disabling, deleting the profile. Okay, here on the screen, on the slides, so you can see the definition once again, solving the two issues for the remote SIM provisioning and the form factors. Okay, so the definition is actually the EUSSC, which is not easily accessible or replaceable, is not intended to be removed or replaced in the terminal and enables the secure changing of subscriptions. M2M architecture. So I hope you remember all of the details and what is the purpose of the single components of the system when we talk about the SIMDP, SMSR, or the EUSSC itself. So maybe about the M2M service provider and the CI, the EUSSC manufacturer, device and operator. I don't know how good you remember the interfaces, at least, so the names of the interfaces, but it's good to know so what is connected and how. So what is a communication chain? Okay, and here we have the consumer devices architecture. So, and the main component of, or main difference is, as you can see from the architecture, is the LPA or the LPAD on this slide. So the local profile assistant in the device. You can see now that there is still the subscription manager for data preparation, but enhanced one. So compared to the M2M architecture, and yes, but we don't have the SMSR in this architecture. So therefore, here there is the LPA, and we have the functionality of the SMDS. Yes, and the main difference, as I said, so the control, so the direction of control, here we have the end user inside of this picture. Yes, I hope you're now good to go and prepared for the last part of the training. So we'll talk about the standards and the certification part. Okay, let's dive in, and I hope you will enjoy it. International standards. Okay, mainly, so we will talk about the ETSI, the GSMA defining the M2M consumer devices solution, and the Trusted Connectivity Alliance. This is the new name of the SIMalliance. Okay, what are the groups and standardization bodies involved in the remote SIM provisioning? First of all, let's start with ETSI. ETSI is the European Telecommunication Standardization Institute. So responsible for the definitions of the telecommunication, and yes, in this case, they defined the form factor of the EUSSC. So we had these two form factors. Yes, and ETSI was involved in this technology from the very beginning, as you can see it from the name. So they defined the very basics of the technology, so what we use right now in the telecommunications. So they are very familiar with the standards, and this is the standardization group. So ETSI, I don't know how familiar you are with the standards and standardization groups and bodies. So there are standardization bodies defining the standard itself, and then there are also standardization bodies, or certification bodies, so who are certifying the products according to the standards defined by the standardization bodies. Okay, ETSI is, sometimes there is a mix, so sometimes so one of the standardization groups is acting as both, so defining the standards and certifying the standard according to the standard, but ETSI is just the standardization group. So here we have the GSMA. GSMA defined the remote SIM provisioning itself for M2M and consumer devices, acting as a standardization group in this case. So GSM Association. You probably heard of the SIMalliance, because this was the established name for the long time. But nowadays, so it's so new that I sometimes to remember also the correct name. So because it's very new. But this is the Trusted Connectivity Alliance. This is a new name. And SIMalliance, or Trusted Connectivity Alliance, provided the interoperable profile format. Okay, what it is? So it's a format of the profile, because it was quite important, because before we had the EUSSC, or the concept of the profiles, each operator defined its own profiles, and it was on the SIM card, on the physical SIM card. It was not a problem, so it was not needed to download it somewhere. But nowadays, so we have this big difference, because we have a profile, and who knows how it will behave on a physical card after the download. And therefore, there was a initiative in the SIMalliance group defining the format of such a profile. So in order that it can be so similar from the format aside, to be visible, so, or to be usable at all platforms. Global platform. Okay, global platform is, as I said, so it's one of this acting on both sides groups, so defining the standards and defining, so certifying according to the standards. Yes, if you're coming from the area of smart cards, you'll know the famous global platform card specification, which is defining especially so the way how to download applets on the smart card. Yes, so therefore, so there are many many implementations coming from the global platform, and also from the ETSI, similar to ETSI. Yes, and it's used, so the global platforms also certifying the EUSSCs, but we'll come to this later. Global Certification Forum, okay, responsible for the certification of the devices. So in the telecommunication area, quite established. And PTCRB, famous for the device certification as well. So probably I would say so that GCF is mainly used by for device certification in Europe and in Asia. So while PTCRB is more used by the operators and device vendors for certification of devices in North America. Okay, let's go one by one and talk about ETSI, European Telecommunication Standards Institute. Okay, so there was a big discussion who would define what. So it's important so that, ETSI is famous for the telecommunication standards. And therefore, so ETSI is also defined the USSC related specifications, which are applicable right now also for the EUSSC. This is the mother of all specifications. So for the USCC, or so defining the platform is the ETSI TS 1022221. So defining the USCC terminal interface physical and logical characteristics. This is actually how we started to use the SIM card by this specification. So this specification applied. Okay, so there are also the test specification for this. So this is the ETSI TS 102.230-2. Yes, defining on the USCC terminal interface the physical, electrical, and logical, testing the logical characteristics. This is the test specification. In the part 2, we have the USCC features. So it's important for USCC just to know that there is a test specification to test the USCC itself. So because EUSCC is actually still USCC. And then coming closer to the definition of the EUSCC, so we have the form factors. So for the M2M specified for solderable USCCs. These are famous, the MFF1 and MFF2 form factors. Okay, so you know all of the formats we have right now. So this is also one of them. So this kind of the bug. So yes, this is the specifications at CTS 102.671, machine-to-machine USCC, physical logical characteristics. The communication module within the device shall conform to the terminal requirements within at CTS 102.221 for all standardized ETSI form factors, which also implies MF1 and MFF2. Okay, so this is one of the requirements so inside of the GSMA specification. GSMA specification is using a lot from the other specifications, so like ETSI or global platform. Okay, GSMA initiatives. How did it start? We had this, first of all, there was a solution for M2M devices. Because, the M2M specification for EUSCC remote provision started in the SIM working group in GSMA. The groups worked on this since 2013. This is almost now, okay, we have now almost the 7 years. Okay, in the beginning in this group, so there was the initiative was mainly driven by the card vendors or the SIM vendors, defining the standard, and also supporting operators. Okay, and then after a while, so there was a need for the consumer devices definition, and this started as a fast-track project with a lot of meetings in between. So for the defining of the specification, the groups met every second week for the whole week to define it, and there was a huge number of participants from the different companies, so including the device vendors. Okay, so there was the specific RSP group under the umbrella of the RSP group, started in 2015. Now I'm mentioning a lot of these different groups. At the beginning, the names were different, but now, so it's easier to remember if you take a look on the GSMA web pages and be a member. So if you are a member of the GSMA, so it's not easy to get through all of the groups. So I will try to guide you. Okay, first of all, so we have this, I will start in the middle. So I will have this eSIM group as industry specification issuing group. So this is the eSIM interest group actually. Defining now, so it's responsible for M2M and the consumer device standards. Before it was separated. Okay, in this eSIM group, so we have the subgroups or working groups. So let's start with the working group 1. So it was the former requirements group partially. So it was different for a consumer device and M2M, but actually from the meaning, so this is common to name this group as a requirement group, so REC group, because yes, they are defining the requirements. And they aim to maintain existing requirements and draft new requirements for new features agreed by the eSIM group. Then we have the eSIM Working Group 2. This is the former tech or technical group, so defining the technical specification, responsible for the specification. So, by the way, so in the requirement group, so it's mainly the representatives of the operators. In the technical group, so this is for, yes, open for all, but also so mainly the manufacturers. Okay, and the technical group is responsible to of maintaining the existing technical specification, drafting the new technical content based on the agreed requirements from the working group 1. So there is a kind of process of discussions, and so after the definition of the requirements, so the tech also verifies and explains if it's feasible or not to implement these requirements in the existing content and in the field. And then we have, here we go, here this is my home, technically now, so okay. We have the working group 3, the test group. So the group responsible for the test specification, aiming to maintain existing test specification and drafting new test cases based on the GSMA technical specification. Again, so similar to working group 2, is verifying the requirements and trying to, yes, define the technical specification according to these requirements. The test groups define the tests according to the technical specification and to the requirements, and checking so if there are some issues or some things are not testable, so there is always a communication with the working group 2 or even working group 1. So to see if these requirements are testable or not, if these features can be tested. Okay, after the test specification is in place or exists, so the tests are ready. So then it goes to the certification group or the working group 4, the CERT. So this group focuses on the compliance aspects of the eSIM, including drafting and maintaining the GSMA compliance processes. So actually, this group is responsible of definition how to certify your product. So what are the required specification, which tests have to be run and when and where. What is the responsible certification body for this? Okay, so this is for the, so in general. So we have the test group, so the working group 3, working on the functional specification mainly. And then we have the security assurance group, so group working on the security assurance scheme. So this is working group 5. So they focus on the EUSSC security requirements, for example, the protection profile, and assurance definition for the GSMA defined M2M and consumer devices. Okay, then there is a working group 6, which is kind of, yes, a group which does not produce any specifications compared to the other groups. But this is a group responsible for the profile interoperability. So it was especially important because this group was responsible for interoperability testing. So this group was responsible for interoperability testing. We had this, so already 2 of so-called light events or live interoperability testing events. And this group was responsible, so existing as a mailing list basically, and meeting at this interoperability tests. To focus on constantly improving the level of profile interoperability across the global eSIM ecosystem by a variety of activities. Then we have nowadays the working group 7. This is the group, also the IoT group, so or low power, so responsible for the low power IoT. So as you remember, so there are some constraints for some systems which are not where so the main specifications, so main definitions of the definitions of the mainstream of the EUSSCs, they are maybe not very well applicable. So especially, for example, if you have the low power, low energy devices or devices with low costs, how do you deal with this? So then the complex process of the certification and also implementation of this maybe doesn't make sense there very well. So this group is now verifying existing requirements and trying to define something which is more appropriate for this specific area. So it's a question if it would be just an amendment, just a note, or just so maybe even a new specification. Yes, this is a subgroup, so aiming to develop a new IoT provisioning specification, or maybe an amendment or whatever, under the umbrella of the eSIM program. Okay, currently we have 7 groups, but yes, all these groups produce specific, so despite of the group 6, so they produce some specifications, and the process goes in the way that for the approval, so first of all, the specification will be approved by the actual group, working group. So then there is an approval of the eSIM group required, so which it goes up, and then it goes to the industry specification approving group, so which gives the final approval of this specification. So we have a specific hierarchy to approve the existing specifications. Okay, we went through the overall structure or the groups of the existing standards, and then let's go to the specifications itself. Hope you will not be bothered with the numbering. Let's start with the M2M specifications, or the current versions of the specifications which you can see on the screen. I will explain you the meanings or what the purpose of the specific specification is. So first of all, we have the SGP01, which was the first specification defined, and it's called Remote Provisioning Architecture of Embedded USSC. So this specification defines, yes, the architecture, but basically the requirements for the M2M ecosystem. The implementation of these requirements was done in the SGP02 specification, which is a Remote Provisioning Architecture for Embedded USSC technical specification. Okay, so since the version 4, so we have these 2 new components defined in the architecture of the specification, the M2M service provider, and the device itself is considered. SGP11, this is the test specification for the SGP02 and 01. So the test specification, and the name of this specification is Remote Provisioning Architecture for Embedded USSC Test Specification. So this is a specification which is required for the functional certification. This contains the tests. Yes, and the tests, since we don't have requirements in the M2M world, so we basically don't have requirements for the device. So it contains only the tests for the eUSSC and the server side. But the device is out of scope of the certification program at the moment. Though we just recently have this new entity, the device, but there is still no test, no certification program is defined for the device. So yes, and we have also some end-to-end testing as well defined in the SGP11. SGP05 is the Embedded USSC Protection Profile. So this is a specification required for the security testing. And then finally we have the SGP16 defining the M2M compliance process. In this specification, you will see which version of the specification is relevant for the certification of your product, and so which version is active or deprecated, and what is required to receive the compliance from GSMA, so to get the stamp that your product is compliant according to the GSMA specifications. What is planned in the future? So okay, we have the SGP01, again with the Remote Provisioning Architecture for Embedded USSC. So in the next versions of the upcoming versions are already planned, so you can see them on the screen. So by the way, we're trying to be very much on time. So and as soon as the specification is approved by the eSIM group, or we try to put the date on the slides. So sometimes it's the final approval of the ISIC group. So maybe a few weeks later, and maybe there is a switch of the month. So, but it doesn't matter actually that much in this case. So you have to take a look on the compliance specifications. So like in this case, in the M2M SGP16, which is showing you the relevant product. Okay. SGP02. Yes, it's unplanned since we have this update in the SGP01. So there are already even several versions planned already, or already almost ready. Yes, and definitely there will be a new specification since we have changes in the core specifications, and this changes has to be adjusted. So the SGP11 has to be adjusted according to these changes. So we'll probably have the next version of the SGP11 soon. So especially after the test fest. So we'll talk about this later. So test fest program from Global Platform. Yes, and there is this new version of the compliance process as well. So this is what is planned. So since we have the change in the specifications, SGP16, you can see it on the slides. Okay, let's go to the consumer device specifications. Okay, here we have several subversions active. So there is a SGP21, remote provisioning architecture for embedded USSC for consumer devices. This specification defines the requirements for the consumer devices ecosystem. The technical specification is the SGP22, remote provisioning architecture for embedded USSC technical specification for consumer devices. Here we have several subversions, even going to the 3 digits, because actually it has a background that initially it was planned that the version, so the next version, the version 3, phase 3 will come up very early, so even in 2018. So, but it was not possible due to some regulations and yes, some reasons outside of the technique. Therefore, we had some updates in the maintenance updates in the SGP22. Yes, the test specification is the SGP23. So here, this specification was developed quite soon after the, so as soon as the SGP21 and 22 were ready. And yes, Comprion was involved, or I was involved in the definition of the test cases. So in this specification compared to the M2M, one also contains the device test cases as well. So it's not only EUSSC test cases testing the EUSSC interface. By the way, so the EUSSC interface is testing for the removable EUSSCs. Yes, then there's device tests, and there are device tests and the server tests as well. So you can see the current version on the screen. So this version is applicable to the latest version of the core specification, the technical specification. And yes, we have this SGP26 for the certificates, which are used for testing of the compliant products. As you remember the certificate scheme, so and it's important to know that so for testing purposes, if you submit your product for testing in any of the certification bodies, so you need this product to be properly configured. This configuration is also defined in the SGP23 and also in the SGP11. And for the SGP11, the definition of the certificates is given by Global Platform, while in the SGP23, so yes, it refers to the SGP26, which are defining the test certificates to be used for testing of the EUSC's devices on the servers. SGP24 defines the compliance process. Again, here you can find so all of the requirements or the process details to how to verify your product for compliancy to the existing consumer device specifications. Last but not least, but we have the EUSSC, RSP EUSSC for consumer device protection profile defined. This is the SGP25. So you can see the current versions on the screen. Let's go to the planned versions. Okay, so version 3 is planned. So since a while ago, So now finally we have the agreed features, so to be included in these versions. So the estimated date is probably by the end of this year, but I'm not sure. So since the work is just started for the moment, and so we'll see. Yes, same then for the SGP22. So the publication depends on the SGP21 approval. And so yes, we have the set of the features to be, so there is already a set of the features already defined and implemented. So there is still a small amount of work to be done. It's planned to finish by the end of this year. But let's see. And then depending, okay, so first of all, we have the SGP23 plan, the regular maintenance update, which is usually comes each, in accordance to the GCF and cycles of the certification. So therefore, it should be the 3 months, but sometimes it doesn't fit. So due to, because sometimes the specification is not approved by the group for some reasons. And yes, we have this maintenance update, so with this version 1.x. Yes, and for the version 3, we'll have a major change, and therefore the major version of the SGP23, starting with a version 2.x. Or yes, starting by 0, but then with continuing. And then there will be a difference. So currently we have all of the specification, so details in one. So, and currently the SGP23 contains almost 700 pages, so which is already huge, and it's very difficult to maintain this. Therefore, and since the core specification almost doubled the pages already right now, so I don't know how many it will be in the future. So we'll have, yes, it will be even more difficult with the test specification. And therefore, there will be split into 3 parts. So there will be, yes, SGP23-1 for the EUSSC-2 for the device, and -3 for the server side. Yes, SGP24, the compliance process is planned as well, so to be updated. And yes, even for 2 versions, so for the version, so for the maintenance releases, and also especially for this major change in the version 3. Don't forget the SIMalliance specifications, because they are very important in this context. There are changes, especially to the 5G profiles. There were some changes, and therefore we have the core specification. It's the EUSSC profile package interoperable format technical specification. By the way, the specification are available on the according pages of the standardization groups. Yes, and you can see the current version on the screen. And there is a test specification, so you can see the current version on the screen. So for it's called the interoperable format test specification. Yes, and this specification are referred, so yes, depending the core specification, the core standards, and the test specification and the test standards. So please check the references of the versions also inside of the specifications. So you have this specification parts or references parts in the specifications. Okay, so now let's sort the specifications to the according groups, who produces what. Okay, here we have the more detailed view on this. Yes, so starting with, so from the very beginning, so the ISA groups, so industry specification approving groups, they have responsibilities described in the document, which is called AA35. This is a regulatory or political yes, definitions how the process should be. So, and because it's not always the case that each and everyone agrees with the definitions and requirements, and sometimes there is a vote, and therefore we have this regulations inside of the AA35 document. Okay, the eSIM group, so as yes, the top level group to manage the delivery and approval of all eSIM specifications, as I explained before. Then still there is an interest group, so to separate a list of companies who wish only to observe and to be informed. Okay, the specification. Let's go one by one. So the working group 1, so they produce the specification as GP01 for M2M, GP21 for consumer, and we have even the SSP specification, which is not relevant for the current topic, as GP51. We have in the SGP, so in the working group 2, the responsibilities for the SGP02, SGP22 for the consumer devices. Then we have the policy specification, the SGP14, for defining the EU SSC PKI policy. I mentioned this briefly in the, so while we talked about the certificates and the security aspects. This is a specification defining the policy for the PKI. Yes, we have the SGP52 for the SSP aspects, not relevant for here right now. In the SGP23s, the responsibilities are there for the SGP11, yes, for the M2M test specification, SGP23 for the consumer devices test specification, yes, and the test certificates defined in the SGP26. SGP16 and SGP24 are defined in the specified in the working group 4. They have the responsibility for this. Protection profiles, logically, they are in the working group 5, the security group. So with yes, SGP05 for M2M, SGP25 for the consumer devices. Yes, the working group 6 does not produce any. Yes, they have some working documents for to run the live interoperability event, but it's not a specification in terms of GSMA. Yes, and the working group 7, they just started. They plan to have even maybe their own specification or amendment to the existing ones. Okay, let's summarize your knowledge and test, summarize what you learned and test your knowledge. So if it's easy, again, same game as before. So if it's easy for you to reply to all of these questions, then you're good to go. And if you have difficulties, please take a look on the notes or the slides so that you will receive, or just go back to some parts of the training. Which documents are defining the M2M RSP technology? Which documents are defining consumer devices RSP technology? And which group is responsible for the definition of the technical specification? That's all. I think it's good if you could remember everything and you know all of the answers to this. Okay, now we'll have a short break. And you can refresh your memory, take your time to answer this question. I say bye and see you in the second part of the last part of the training. And yes, we'll talk about certifications. Bye.